everybody, and welcome back. It is Wednesday, June 9th, 2021, and you're listening to episode 115 of the Can I Say Something podcast. I'm your host and recluse with a juicy caboose, Damien. Joining me today, we have a very special guest.
Hey, everybody. I am Derrick McDuff.
And right into
Thanks
the
for
show.
having me on.
Yeah, no problem. You're right to the show, bicycle@gmail.com, bicycle on Twitter, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, rate and review it on Apple Podcasts, tell a friend, family member, or stranger. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So how long have you been with podcasting in general?
We just celebrated our 2-year anniversary of our podcast, Underrated. So yeah, I did a little bit of podcast stuff before that, kind of sporadically, but I've actually been really doing it for 2 years.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so this is basically the same as me. I started in early 2019. Me and my buddy, two guys, me, Andy, and Dion, got together. It was sort of the thing where, mainly the main priority of the podcast was just to hang out, just have guys come in, hang out. We're all in our mid-30s, so those two guys have, kids, family, stuff like that. So it was just a thing where I wanted a place for us to hang out and just chat. And one of them dropped out after a while, but it was fun. It was fun for a while, and I'm still doing it with Dion and his wife. So yeah, it's been fun. What was the impetus for you to actually start yours?
I mean, honestly, we're pretty similar in that where it was just me and a couple friends, and we all had always just kind of talked about movies and stuff like that, and we'd go see movies at the theater all the time, and then just after the film would get out, we'd just be talking for a couple hours afterwards, and we were all kind of big podcast fans, so we're like, we're always talking about movies and stuff. Maybe we should, one of these days record what we have to say, but we didn't really have an idea for a show at first. We kind of kicked some stuff around, and then one day I was watching the movie Stardust, the 2007 one. Yep. And we were just texting, and we were all in this group chat together, and one of my co-hosts, Alan, was just like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just watching Stardust." And we were all just like, "Oh yeah, it's a super underrated movie." And it just kind of all three of us, me, Alan, and Ariel, who now do the podcast together, just kind of were like, "Oh, that's it. That's the podcast. We talk about underrated movies because we all just love movies, and especially ones that are like, hey, maybe people should see this because not a lot of people know about it, or if people do know about it, it's kind of maybe like a cult one, or it lost money at the box office or whatever." And we just kind of, we've always just loved that discussion between ourselves, and so we just kind of made that into a podcast.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, it was pretty much the same thing here. The podcast sort of evolved over time, and I think it's probably evolved so much from the beginning that it would probably be a good thing to do is to sort of maybe start over in terms of a different name, because we recorded a bunch of episodes early on, probably 5 or 6 episodes early on, and those will never see the light of day. They were so bad. The quality, the sound quality, the discussions, it went on for a long time. Each one was 3 hours. So eventually we did move on to a different model, different format of just how about we, write stuff down. Let's write down our topics. Let's write down a basic outline for the show. Right. And so that's been sort of the template going forward since then. But did you have any difficulty at first of being let's try to keep this topic on track. Let's have an outline. Let's not veer off too far from the main topic. Was that an issue for you at first?
I think at first we were almost too structured, whereas we're okay, we're going to have a structure where we'll open it up and we'll give we'll describe the whole plot of the movie, and then we'll going to talk about, some reviews that people thought were underrated and stuff like that. And we kind of it didn't let us be ourselves and just kind of talk more freely. But once the podcast had been going for it only took a couple episodes to be okay, we don't really need to give a recap of the movie, we can just kind of talk about it more free form, and just kind of cut out a lot of that stuff that we think that was there just kind of almost for padding, where it's just now our podcasts, usually we don't go over an hour, we're just kind of just more conversational, kind of you guys are just kind of shooting the shit. And I'm allowed to cuss on this podcast?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, just kind of one, and also like you said, I think the big thing was that our sound was horrible back then because none of us really knew what we were doing. I lost the vote at first. We recorded the first couple episodes outside, and I was the one who was doing all the audio editing, and that was really rough. And now that I can edit on, we're all doing it over Discord. It's a lot cleaner and nicer, and there's not, and I do separate audio tracks now as opposed to just everybody being mixed into one. So it is. Oh, it's come a long way. When I go back and listen to those early episodes, I cringe a little bit. I'm like, oh man, I love the topic that we're talking about, but it is hard to listen to some of that stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So when you first started, were you a big fan of podcasts going into it? How long have you been listening to podcasts before you started your own?
Yeah, I'm a really big podcast fan. I've been listening to podcasts for a few years now because I would just need something to listen to at work when I'd open. I work at a bookstore, and so do all of us. That's where we all met. And I would listen to, just when I'd be doing, sometimes I do overnights, or, when I get there, 2 hours, just kind of put the books on the shelves before we open, and I need something to do. So I'll just, that's how I got started kind of listening to podcasts, and, a lot of movie podcasts I started getting really into, and that kind of, led to me being like, well, I think this might be something. I know a bit about movies. Maybe I can do something like this.
Yeah. Nice. So what were some of the stuff you were listening to back then? What are some like good movie podcasts that you like?
So one that really got me into podcasts just in general was a podcast called The Weekly Planet, which is because I got into that by like watching the same guy. He has a YouTube channel. It's called Mr. Sunday Movies, and through his YouTube channel, I got into his podcast, and I still listen to it to this day. It's a really good podcast, and they talk about movies, but also other stuff like TV shows and comic books and stuff. And then through that, I kind of expanded into, other podcasts. One movie podcast that I really, really love a lot is it's called Beyond the Screenplay, and it is just kind of it's conversational again, but it is kind of more on a script writing focus. They kind of just take a look at different screenplays, and that one I would recommend to anybody. Definitely check out Beyond the Screenplay. Anybody out there? Show Me the Meaning by Wisecrack is another pretty solid one. It's not on movies, but Joanna Robinson's podcast that she does with a couple other people, The Storm, which used to be a Game of Thrones podcast, but then I started listening to it when it became a Lost podcast, because I'm a really big fan of Lost. That's another one I'd highly recommend to anybody.
Yeah, Joanna Robinson is one of my favorite podcasters out there right now. She does the Still Watching podcast for Vanity Fair. I've been watching Mayor of Easttown. I've been keeping up with that. And she does a weekly show, catching up with that, doing theories about who's the killer and things like that. Then before that, she was doing recaps of WandaVision and Falcon the Winter Soldier, and I'm a huge fan of that stuff. So yeah, Joanna Robinson is one of my favorite podcasters out there. Big Picture is another good one. It's on the Ringer Network. Sean Fennessy, Matt and Dobbins, really good one. Film Spotting, it's a Chicago-based one. Adam Kempenaar is a really great critic. Waypoint Radio is a good one I like to listen to. It's mainly focused on video games, but they do veer off into other topics, politics and race and stuff like that. So really, really great one if you're interested in stuff like that. And just in general, the way that I think people talk about the things they're passionate about. I again, talking about why we started podcasting, I feel like for me, I had a lot of, discussions with friends that were basically very surface level, very like, I liked the movie because it was good. I didn't like it because it was bad. Here are some scenes I liked. Here are some scenes I didn't like, stuff like that. And listening to people talk about movies and video games in a much deeper, more nuanced way is something that I really, really latched onto and got highly interested in. And I feel like, for the most part, me and my co-host Dion do a pretty good job of delving into that stuff. But did you feel like from the beginning that you and your co-host sort of had difficulty sort of articulating why you liked what you liked?
I don't, I think by that point we had all been talking with each other about film for so long that I think we actually did a pretty good job of it. And I don't have a huge background with like film studies or anything like but I do know a little bit about it, just because, partially just watching just a ton of video essays on it and stuff like that. But I also took a little, like I said, like I wasn't a film major, but I took for example, a film music class in college. So I do know some stuff about that. And I, my one of my best friends and my former roommate, he was a film major, and I was, in a couple of his student films. So, and then, yeah, they're both, my co-hosts are very, very knowledgeable about movie stuff too.
Yeah.
So I think that was one advantage we had going in, where we didn't really have any growing pains in that aspect.
Yeah.
It was more the technical side of running the podcast and just kind of figuring out how it would work. That was a little tougher for us.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I found just in general talking to my friend and his wife is just, like you said, you are pretty you're very knowledgeable about the movie stuff and the terms and things like that. What I found talking to Dion is just a lot of times I'll bring up something, a term or a filmmaking term like fridging or the Uncanny Valley or Chekhov's gun, things like that. They're just like, hold on, wait, pause. What was that? What is that thing? What's that thing you just said? I've never heard of that before. So yeah, it's a little, I don't know, it's a little bit of a growing pain, I guess I would call it, just based on doing the show myself. And I was just curious if you've ever, had that issue on your show.
I don't think I've really had it a ton. There might be some like dramatic or, like storytelling conventions that maybe I might have to explain a little bit. But I would say we're all pretty knowledgeable about that stuff.
Yeah.
Because like I was before I was an English major, so I did study a lot of literature and stuff like that. And then before that I actually studied theater for a little bit. So I think the growing pain is less like the storytelling conventions and maybe like how films are kind of like shot, like maybe stuff with cinematography and things like that. Yeah. We might be a little less knowledgeable about than just like what Chekhov's gun is. I think stuff like that.
Yeah. So talking about, how you talk about movies and stuff you're interested about movies, things I found really interesting about like the big picture and The Watch and other things is they really get into the minutia of like the film industry itself. I just read Mark Harris's book about Mike Nichols, the director, his biography in there. I found that stuff really, really interesting. Do you get into are you interested in talking about or getting into the industry side of movies, like who bought, Amazon just bought MGM. So is that something you guys like to talk about or not so much?
I mean, it's something that definitely interests me. And it has, come up on our show a couple times. Like, I can't remember what movie we were talking about, but we were kind of talking about how it was a Fox movie, and it was one of the last movies that was put out while Fox was still Fox before it got swallowed up by Disney. And we were kind of talking about like how that's maybe going to change things with the way, Fox is distributing movies. It's not going to be able to distribute as much stuff, or the kind of things that it puts out might be a little different, with, Disney kind of being, the kind of overlords of, this new studio, and how, just the amount of studios are just kind of decreasing over time. There's the less of the big studios. They're just kind of all swallowing each other up. And, I think one of the big things that we talk about a lot on Underrated is that there is this kind of growing gap where the middle budget movie is kind of just disappearing, where a lot of stuff is going the way of like it's a big budget Disney blockbuster, or it's like an A24 film where it's like a micro budget horror film. And those kind of mid-range like romantic comedies and stuff that you might see are becoming less and less common because of just the way the film industry has gone. So stuff like that we definitely talk about.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's definitely something where, like you said, that the middle range movie is definitely, not as popular anymore. I was watching some stuff on Criterion recently, like, California Split and a bunch of these, $5 million movies. Like you said, it's just not going to be a thing anymore, which is unfortunate. But hopefully they do get picked up by smaller studios in the future. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about your all-time favorite movies. I basically ask me a different day of the week, I'll give you a different answer. But basically, I love No Country for Old Men is one of my favorites. Super recently, I have a recency bias for Parasite. I've been going back to that movie a couple times. I just got it on Criterion. The Criterion Blu-ray came out a little while ago, and I picked that up again and watched it. Really love that movie. So really any the big directors of Spielberg, Coen Brothers, PTA, Wes Anderson, people like that. So what are some of your go-to, like if somebody just asked you, what's your favorite stuff? What is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about, big directors, I love a lot of Spielberg stuff. Spielberg and Scorsese are probably, some of my favorite directors, with good reason. But first, if you give me one that I would probably pick any day of the week, it would be Jurassic Park. Like, that movie is just so good on every single level. Like, it's a great action film. You care about the characters. It's a thriller. It's a family film, but, you still have like moments of just real terror. Like, I think it was one of the first movies I think I ever saw when I was a kid, because it came out when I was like 3, because I'm, in my 30s now, and it's still like, holds up just across the board. Just everything about that movie. It's funny. The performances are great from these actors who were mostly pretty unknown at the time. Some other ones that I really, really love. I love a lot of Miyazaki stuff. My favorite of his is definitely Princess Mononoke. Like, that's a movie I can watch endlessly. Like, just gorgeous, and just the storytelling is so brilliant, and just, I'll watch it dubbed or subbed or whatever. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is obviously, I count that as kind of one movie. Just incredible for a lot of reasons. There's a reason those movies just won all the Academy Awards.
Yep.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, another, if we were going back a little, that's kind of one of my favorite pre-70s movies is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, really ahead of its time, or by the same screenwriter, Princess Bride. Mm-hmm. And then I should mention, this is kind of a unconventional one for somebody, but I really love Superbad. That movie just, for me, it came out in the exact right time where it came out the summer that I had just graduated high school. And I felt like I've seen so many movies about high school kids, but none of them really depicted how high school kids talked, and just, how every other word, you would just say fuck, and just, the way that you were just like about, like, you're just dumb and you want to go to a party and stuff. It's because it was written by Seth Rogen when he was in high school. And it is just a movie that does, I feel like, have like a good moral about like friendship, and just, caring about like the people who mean the most to you. And I don't know, it's a really good movie, I think. And I think that some film people will kind of like look down on it because it is very crass and, has a lot of, crude jokes in it. But I think it is actually a spectacular movie.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. That genre of like, crass, gross out, high school party, that genre of movies kind of went away for a while. I think the last notable one, was in 2010 with Easy A, with Emma Stone. Mm-hmm. And I think it's coming back a little bit. They have Booksmart came out in 2019, I want to say. It was directed by Olivia Wilde. I think that is definitely a genre that, they're you could say it's the boys genre, but they're just swapping the genders. But I think it's a really interesting, way of looking at that genre again of just gross kids being gross, and like, okay, let's try it with the girls now. I think that's a really interesting way of going about it.
I did really like Booksmart, and it kind of like solidified a theory that I have had about every generation has one movie that I think captures that generation, where it's like, okay, it's the end of the school year, and it's like two or a small group of friends, and they're just kind of like going to a party, or it's like the last hurrah, because Gen Z had Booksmart, millennials we had Superbad. Before that was Fast Times at Ridgemont High, probably, and then you have what's the one Harrison Ford's in it? American Graffiti is like the one for the boomers.
Yeah.
And every generation kind of loves their own one. Like, the boomers put that one on the AFI Top 100 list, we have Superbad, and now we see the next generation's is Booksmart. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. So was there anything before the pandemic you were like, okay, if the world just stopped for like a month, I would finally catch up on X. I would watch this movie. I'd watch this TV show, whatever. Was there anything you watched last year that you wanted to watch for a long time, but finally had the chance to?
I caught up on a lot of stuff that I had kind of just fallen off of.
Yeah.
Like one, for example, was I had watched the first couple seasons of oh my gosh, I'm for spacing on the name. It's the Kung Fu show on AMC, Into the Badlands.
Oh, okay.
And that was a show that I really enjoyed, and I just kind of like fell off of for whatever reason. But I went back and watched the final season for that, and that was really good. I caught up on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so it was more like stuff like, oh man, I need to rewatch this. But I watched a lot of new stuff too. Stuff like Queen's Gambit and I'm trying to think the one where Dakota, not Dakota. She's the Queen of Russia. Oh my gosh, I'm so spacing on stuff right now.
Yeah, it was The Favorite, but it was like a TV version of The Favorite.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
The Great.
The Great. Thank you. Yeah. I watched The Great.
Yep.
Obviously like stuff like The Boys and The Mandalorian and all that. That were Ted Lasso is another one that I thought was really great that came out during the pandemic.
Yep.
Yeah.
That one is Ted Lasso's season 2. I believe is debuting this month. It's either this month or next.
Is
month.
it coming out? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
That's cool. I didn't know it was coming so quick. I'd heard some rumblings about it, but I didn't realize it was coming right now. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I actually last year I did a thing which I intended to do for a long time, which is watch one movie a day at least. So I watched 365 movies last year. Made a whole list of them.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So just real quick, I'm just going to mention a couple of them. The number one movie from last year was Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always for me. It was, I don't know if you've seen it.
I need to see it. I've heard just only good things about it, but I never got around to it.
Yeah. Really, really great movie. Just the movies that really impacted me last year were stuff where it was either an actress or an actor who wasn't, quote unquote, professional actor. They were either did one thing or really nothing before this first role, and it really blew me away. It was directed by Eliza Hittman. Cindy Flanagan, Talia Ryder played two girls trying to get an abortion in New York City during. Actually, it's a contemporary movie, so very, very interesting. I really like The Nest from last year. It was directed by Sean Durkin with Jude Law and Carrie Coon. I'm not sure if you checked out that one yet.
That was one that was on my list, and I was going to watch it, and then it was like, it never came down from like $20 because I'm a really big Carrie Coon fan because I love The Leftovers.
Yeah.
And Jude Law is obviously great too, but I just never wanted to shell out the $20 or whatever to watch it.
Yeah. I bought a bunch of stuff last year for $20, way too much, I would say. Soul, I had number 4. I really, really loved that movie. I thought that was deeply, deeply moving about, just finding your passion in life, finding your way in the world, finding finding the reason, for what you do in the world, and finding out that maybe it's just, living is just enough. So that was very, very impactful. Yeah,
I did see Soul, and I really loved that movie.
Yeah. Did you catch any of the Lovers Rock, Mangrove, the Small Axe film that was put out by Steve McQueen last year?
Yeah, I saw the first two. I saw Lovers Rock and Mangrove, which I didn't get a chance to see any of the rest of them, but I did really enjoy both of those. And on I did a top 5 list, and I had Lovers Rock as my number 4 pick for last year. That was just an incredible, just kind of slice of life movie, I thought.
Yeah, your top 5 and my top 5 overlapped a lot. You had I'm Thinking of Ending Things. That was my number 13 one of last year. Palm Springs was my number 12. And just going down the last 2 are number 9. I had Sound of Metal, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was number 10. So yeah, a lot of really good shit last year. As far as catching up for old stuff, I did watch all the Miyazaki films. Like you said, Miyazaki's incredible director. I think you said Princess Mononoke was your favorite. Those Mononoke and Spirited Away, I felt like were really, really well done. I feel like the smaller ones, impacted me more emotionally. I don't know if you've seen Whisper of the Heart.
I have not seen Whisper of the Heart because I think he just produced that one, but he didn't direct it.
Right.
If I'm right, yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. So that one, and there's a bunch of smaller ones like Only Yesterday and from Up on Poppy Hill. There were a bunch that I finally discovered and like, wow, these are really, really great little movies that he made. I believe in the early 90s or late 80s. Really, really great movies. And I caught up with Stop Making Sense. The Talking Heads documentary was.
Ooh, I need to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, really good. There was a bunch last year that I finally saw. One Cut of the Dead is one that I think you and anybody listening would really, really enjoy. It's have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
It's really one of the most original movies I've seen in a very long time. So it's basically a film crew goes to to direct a zombie film, and the first half of the film is what they shot, and it looks terrible, and it's just like people are falling over each other, they're forgetting their lines, or like, what is this? What is going on? And then the second half is the reveal, and the reveal is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. One of the most unique, inventive things I've seen in a really long time. So yeah, I definitely highly recommend checking that out.
Okay.
And then I watched
I'll have to give it a watch.
Yeah, and Charlie Chaplin, and just finally rounding out the best stuff I saw last year. City Lights, I watched all of his, but City Lights was the one that really blew me away. Basically, he helps a blind woman. He gets enough money for her to have an eye operation to fix her sight, and she sees him at the end. Well, she sees him at the end. Doesn't know it's him because she never saw him before, and he's like, the tramp, the dirty tramp is like his character that he invented, and was throughout other movies. And she finally sees him and is like, "Oh, get away from me, you dirty hobo!" And he's like, the look on his face when she says that is just devastating. So yeah, I'd highly recommend City Lights if nobody's ever seen any Charlie Chaplin films.
Actually, because I had been trying to watch a lot of the classics during the very first stage of the shutdown, when I wasn't working at all. And that was one of the ones I actually watched was City Lights. I had never really seen any Chaplin stuff before, so I watched a couple of those things. I watched that one, and then I watched another one that I really loved of his was The Gold Rush. But yeah, I watched a lot of stuff, so I really, really enjoyed that one too, for sure. Yeah.
Do you feel like, just talking about old movies and classics, do you feel like there are some that are just, they feel like homework? I'm watching a lot of stuff on Criterion, and I'm catching up with a lot of the the old classics, and it's just like, oh man, I should maybe 30 years ago if I saw this, or maybe if I didn't have a phone 2 feet away from me, maybe I'd be able to get into this. Maybe if I saw it in the theater, without so many distractions, I would get into it more. But do you feel like going back to a lot of these classics, it's hard to sort of watch them and appreciate them as they were 50 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's some you hit the nail on the head where you're like, this feels like homework. Like one that I when I watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I'm sorry because I'm not sure somebody out there that's their favorite film, but I could not. I was just like, this is the most saccharine, just like I'm not a huge Franz Kafka. Frank Capra kind of guy. Like I really, I'm not a huge guy of his, but I'm like, what? I'm gonna try to knock all these movies off the list, for classics that I should see. And I watched it, and it just, I could barely keep my eyes open. And but then there's some that you're like, okay, you go into, and you're like, is this gonna be good? Like a lot of the stuff that I've watched from like Billy Wilder, I'm like, holy shit, how was this made in like the 50s or the 40s or whatever? Like this is incredible. Like. I just watched for the first time during that same time period, I watched Brief Encounter because that's kind of like one of my favorite subgenre of movies, is the kind of like brief encounter movie where it's like the two people, they get together for just a second and they can't be together at the end, have that tearful goodbye. I'm a sucker for movies like that, and Brief Encounter just wrecked me. And I was like, how is this the same guy who made Lawrence of Arabia, which is fun. Yeah. Lawrence of Arabia is a good movie, but it does at times feel a little bit like homework because it's so long, but then Brief Encounter is like 86 minutes. It's in black and white. It's in like one location, and it just is his best movie in my opinion.
Yeah. I've caught up with a bunch of older movies. I watched a bunch of John Cassavetes films recently. The Killing of Chinese Bookie was one I saw a few days ago, and just, I don't know, Cassavetes is one of these guys. I watched another one. I forget what it was, but it just has these very long shots. Like I'm a sucker for a long shot, but you have to be doing something in the shot to keep my attention. But it's just these long shots of people just existing, and that's fine. I get what you're going for, but man, it's rough watching some of that stuff. I checked out
one that was really rough. I want to just before we move too far off is that I watched last year was Gone with the Wind. I had never seen Gone with the Wind before.
It's about 4 hours, right?
And oh my god, it was like it was my whole day. And I was like, I rented it from the library, and I was like, all right, cool. And I watched the first half, and I was like, all right, that was interesting, And I'm like, wait a minute, there's a whole nother disc, what?
Man.
And then I was like, man, And I'm like, I get why like it's a cinematic classic and stuff, but it is boring and racist.
Yeah. Yeah, I checked out what was it, Seven Samurai, Kurosawa film, and it was very. I actually enjoyed it a lot. Again, 3 hours. I don't know what the deal is. All these classics have to be 3 hours, but it actually moved. I felt like it moved. I felt like it had a lot of the modern sensibilities as far as the tone and the pacing of it. So I actually really liked Seven Samurai. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
No, it's on my like HBO Max queue. Like a bunch of Kurosawa stuff is like that, and like the Hidden Fortress and stuff. They're on, and Throne of Blood. Like they're just sitting there on my HBO Max queue. Yeah. One of these days, I'm just gonna have to get to it, but no, I haven't got around to it yet.
It's interesting. HBO Max is fascinating because it has so much on there. I feel like it's one of the best streaming services out there in terms of contemporary stuff, brand new stuff. Obviously, stuff is coming out there and in theaters at the same time. But I was just browsing through the HBO Max sort of like TCM Classics list, and a lot of overlap between that and the Criterion Channel. So I might back out on the Criterion Channel and just go with HBO Max for now. So
yeah, because that's what I've noticed. It just has like HBO Max. It's kind of flown on the radar because I think it's like the app isn't that well designed, but like it has so much stuff. It's really like old Netflix, when Netflix was the only game in town. Like that's how HBO Max feels, because it's like you do have all like that's why I don't have the Criterion channels, because I'm like pretty much anything I'd want to watch from that is on HBO Max. And it also has like all the Miyazaki movies, and it has like Cartoon Network, and it has like Warner Brothers superhero stuff, and it and the list goes on, and it's got so much stuff. Like if I just had to have one streaming service, it would be HBO Max.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually only have a couple more questions. So you do the show Underrated. One of my favorite underrated movies of all time. I just thought of this the other day. It was Darkness Falls. It's from 2003, I believe. Have you seen this movie?
I have not. Okay, remind me what it's about, because that does ring a bell, but I haven't seen it.
Synopsis is: a vengeful spirit has taken the form of the Tooth Fairy to extract vengeance on the town that lynched her 150 years earlier. Her only opposition is the only child. Her only opposition is a child now grown up who had survived her before. So it is this very. It came out 2003, around the same time as The Ring. I think it got forgotten about because of The Ring. Came out at around the same time. One of the most terrifying opening scenes in a horror movie. So the kid is, in bed. He hears something in the hall. That's that sort of thing. He hears something in the hall, gets out of bed, looks at it, goes back into bed. The camera is from his point of view, right? So he slowly pulls down the sheet, and you see the thing just screaming in his face. He runs down the hall into the bathroom, turns on the light, so the thing can only survive in darkness. So he runs into the bathroom, turns on the light, and sits there for the rest of the night. And the camera pulls back into the hallway, and you see just the only thing lit up is the outline of the door of the bathroom. And this ring wraith is basically screaming down at him, trying to get in. It was one of the most terrifying things I've seen as a kid back then. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to check it out. I'll have to mention it and ask if my co-host Alan, because he's like our horror guy, has seen it. Because a lot of the horror movies that we've talked about on the Underrated have been his picks. So I didn't really start to get into horror until a couple years back. I kind of up until college, I guess I kind of just thought of all horror movies as slasher movies, and then I just kind of realized like, oh no, there's a lot more. So I did kind of probably miss out on a lot of stuff before that. I'll have to definitely check that one out. Yeah,
it has a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's criminal. That's not that's not okay. So yeah, just talking about horror movies for a second. Do you feel like we're in like a golden age, or like a good age for horror movies with the A24 coming out with what I think a lot of people call of like RC horror movies, or like psychological horror movies? Do you like the era of horror movies that we're in right now?
Oh yeah, like this is great, because my favorite kind of horror movies are like the kind of psychological horror, the stuff where it's a lot of times it's not something. I don't like the jump scare horror movies. I think those are just boring and uninteresting, and unless you're somebody who gets very easily scared by something jumping out at you, they're not interesting, which I'm not really frightened by that. I really would rather be like more disturbed by a horror movie, just be like have my skin like tingling, like, oh, there's something right there and you can see it, and what are we going to do about it? Then something that just kind of jumps out and frightens you. And that's why I think a lot of these movies, stuff like Midsummer, have, affected me so much, is because I think that they are really just frightening. Or something like The Invisible Man, which came out last year. Which did you get a chance to see that?
Yeah, I loved it. I think it was my number 6 movie of the year. Yeah, really great.
Okay, nice. But yeah, that one, it's so good because you can't even, there's not even a bad guy there. It's just nothingness is scaring you. And I really love all those movies. And a lot of, the best horror movies are movies that are kind of about something more. Like Midsummer is about a breakup, like Invisible Man is about domestic abuse. Aliens is, about like, whatever. It's just I love that kind of stuff in horror movies, and how, this is kind of like you said, a golden age. It's kind of the opposite of like the early 2000s when I was, growing up and getting old enough to watch horror movies, and everything was just like about jump scares. And that's what I think turned me off the genre for so long. And I really can't stand movies like, Paranormal Activity, where it's just like all about like, oh, here we'll build up, and then a sheet moves and somebody jumps at you, Or like, oh, like here's a killer with a mask and he's going to get you. Like, I like the much more psychological, disturbing kind of horror. Yeah,
Hereditary did a thing where I've been praying for a horror movie to do, or even really any movie in general, because I feel like a lot of movies sort of treat the audience kind of dumb. So there was the scene in Hereditary where the guy, the main kid, or the kid at the end, right? He gets up, he has the broken nose or whatever, gets out of bed, and you see his mother. You see who's the actress in that? I forget what her name was, but she's
my gosh.
Yeah, I forget her name. Yeah. But she's in the top corner of the room, and normally what would happen, right, would be the camera, or they would place some sort of unnatural light to highlight the fact that she's in the corner of the room. But they didn't do that at all. They didn't even like move the camera to her. They didn't even put her in focus. They didn't put her in frame at all. And so the filmmaker relies on the audience to be smart enough to actually see her in the corner. So I thought that was a really, really smart way of depicting horror in that movie.
Yeah, no, that was great. I love Hereditary. And one of the movies that I remember like being in high school being like, this is way more frightening than anything I've seen in a long time was Signs. And that's not like objectively, like that's not a horror movie or anything, but it has those moments like, when you just see like out, like Mel Gibson is looking out in the corn stalks or whatever, and you just see like a foot and you're like, did you see that foot over there?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, it's just like you just glued to the TV, or where when, Joaquin Phoenix is just like looking at that TV and it's just like a goofy looking alien in broad daylight, but that's so much scarier than if it was like, a monster just jumping out at you with teeth and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're coming to the end here. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get to the end?
I mean, nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. Other than I guess I will say that, I think you and I definitely, because I was listening to at least the second half of your top picks of last year, and I think we had a lot of like you're saying, a lot of overlap where we did have a lot of movies that we both enjoyed. Yeah. I love talking about movies. I love doing the list that the top, top 10 movies or whatever of the year. It's one of my favorite things to talk about all year, just to put everything in order, talk about, look back on the year in movies. One of my favorite things to do all year. So I was actually really proud of how it turned out. I loved putting it together, even though it's a lot of work to put all the clips in there. I really liked how it turned out. That was a good touch. I love ranking movies and stuff like that too. Like I actually have I work freelance for Watch Mojo, and so I get to exercise my my love of ranking things and my love of movies with that. I have to really try to get into what is that film? Like it's a social media site for movies. What's the Letterboxd.
Letterboxd. Yeah, I have all my movies that I've watched pretty much ever on a list somewhere. But I feel like I wrote them down. They're written down. They're somewhere. It's going to take me a while to get in there to actually put them into my Letterboxd account and stuff like that. So. Yeah.
I really love Letterboxd. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Just what is your stuff? Where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, thank you. So like I was saying before, my podcast is Underrated, and you can find that on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts, Google, whatever. And then you can follow us on Instagram at Undercast Company. That's kind of what me and my friends call ourselves when we make podcasts, or if you want to just follow me, I'm Derrick's Photos, so DERICKS_photos on Instagram. Or, if you're watching Watch Mojo, that YouTube channel, you might have seen some of my work already.
Nice. Awesome. So thank you so much for doing this. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was a blast.
All right. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.